Welcome to the Voices of Impact podcast, where we engage in spirited discourse on the world's most pressing issues with the goal to discover and implement solutions. We are an ambitious youth group, and we will not settle until we have tackled every challenge our world faces.
Previous generations have left us with a host of issues, but the world is ours. Join us as we learn life lessons and how to contribute to a more fair and uplifting planet. We will take the torch from older generations, learning from their mistakes.
We will glean wisdom from the experiences of adults who tried to prevent us from ending up with the issues that we face today, as well as the experiences of adults who, to this day, stand alongside us, fighting the southward progression of many spiraling dilemmas.
Tune in weekly as we approach these many quadrants through the lens of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, for the planet. Voices of Impact is brought to you by the University of San Diego's Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education, PPC Profit Pros, and SchoolCAST, a Cloudcast Media program to empower the voices of young students around the world.
Hello everyone, we're back with another episode of Voices of Impact. The United Nations, or UN, has 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, for a brighter future. In this podcast series, we will have discussions on 12 of the SDGs chosen by our World Council of Youth.
Today, for episode 8, the Council has led us to cover Zero Hunger. We will discuss its issues and solutions alike, inspired by other countries, adding our own thoughts from our research. I'm Shane.
I'm Kenneth.
I'm Isabella, and this is Voice of Impact.
So great to be back since our last episode.
Definitely, team. I think we've had lots of inspirational conversations.
And for this one, I think it's going to be very special because we have a phenomenal guest. Here we have Casey Castillo from the Jacobs and Cushman San Diego Foodbank. But he's not just from the food bank. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the food bank. So he basically oversees everything that's going on. So I'm just very excited for what we're going to go through today.
Same.
And to kind of kick this conversation off, I was looking at this TED Talk yesterday, and I think the biggest point that came to me was hunger is not a food problem, but it's a logistics problem. And as I was thinking about it a little bit more, I was thinking, there's so much food to go around for everyone, but it's a matter of getting the food to the right places. What are your thoughts on this, Casey?
Yeah, well, hello everyone. Grateful for the opportunity to be here with you, and I think that's a great question to start off with. You're absolutely right. I think we all know there's enough food in this world for everyone, and certainly in this country, and ultimately it does come down to logistics. Now, the problem with the logistics is sometimes it's just has been way too expensive, right, to solve it just purely with logistics. What I focused on is really that at a micro level here, just in San Diego County, and so logistics comes certainly into it, but I think it's going to be accomplished with lots of solving hunger is going to be accomplished by utilizing lots of partnerships. And that's how we do it here in San Diego County. And again, at the micro level, we found this to work. I think if you were to go at the macro level, that's how it's going to be accomplished worldwide. For example, in San Diego County, we're feeding 400,000 people per month. A lot of people. And we're able to do that really in two main ways. One is we have direct distribution. So logistically, we have a fleet of 30 vehicles. We pack those vehicles up with boxes and bags of food, and we take them out to hundreds of distributions throughout San Diego County every month. But we also partner with over 450 other nonprofits. This is the other way we get food out into the community. Those nonprofits come and get food from us in our two warehouses, and then they take that food back to their constituents. They take that back to their neighbors, those that are facing food insecurity. We're able to feed nearly 300,000 people through that method alone. Again, and that I share that example is because worldwide, as we look to solve this problem, as we know there's enough food out there, we have to figure out how to efficiently get that food to those that are hungry. And yes, logistically, we can use trains and airplanes and trucks. But we're also going to have to do that in concert with many, many partners. And I think that's how it gets done.
That's very interesting that you talk about partnerships because that's going to be one of our later episodes as well. And I think that was a very good way to kick off our conversation and to frame our conversation for the rest of the time that we have. We split it up into three main obstacles, I would say. And the first one is political instability. The second one is climate change and environmental degradation. And thirdly, we have economic inequality. So for our first one, it's sad to see that in like the Midwest and parts of Asia, and even here, I feel like there's a bunch of wars going on in the Mid East. It's physical wars in Asia, I would say it's more political, so to say, and also here as well. So my question is, how can countries kind of work together to reduce hunger in places that have this conflict, so to say?
Yeah, you're right. Conflict or war creates instability, and I would say the first casualty of instability often is hunger, is food insecurity, and it will take external countries to come in and I think support these areas. It gets really tricky, and I think that's probably a sensitive topic, and I don't know that we always do that very well. But again, there are conflicts all over the world right now, and I think U.S. aid and lots of countries are providing food and helping people in these conflicts with those issues. I would. This is where I'm going to fire back. I'd be interested again. I have focused here in San Diego County at the micro level, and you guys have been focusing, I think, worldwide. I'm curious to hear from each of you on how you think countries can better respond. Again, this is happening. Countries are responding. This is happening. It doesn't mean it's happening well, and enough is being done. I'm curious to hear from you on as you've been following these conflicts, as you've seen U.S. aid and other things like hunger relief, worldwide hunger relief organizations step in. What have you seen work, and where are the areas that you don't think it's working?
For me personally, if I were to generalize it more on the impact of U.S. aid to other countries, I think it's a matter of the aid is being sent and there's a lot of money being sent over, but that aid isn't really being translated to, say, relief, right? And I think the main cause of that is corruption, so to say. So we see it here, we see it almost everywhere, but it is worse in war times just because the people who fight and trying to gain power, they're not doing it just for glory. There's that monetary aspect as well. So
Yeah, Kenneth, people
once
are
we,
getting rich. and,
yeah,
and I think you hit on something, and that's kind of where I was going, is that we're giving aid in lots of different ways, certainly food, but we're also giving cash aid. And I'm with you. I think the cash aid is inspiring lots of corruption. I don't think those dollars are necessarily always getting to those that need it, which is why I would always be more inclined to send tangible things like food. However, that's more expensive to do, right? There's a convenience in cash. And so I think that is one of the challenges that we see as we try to help throughout the world. Absolutely. I think you nailed it, Kenneth.
It's interesting that you say there's a convenience in cash because it helps to explain why a country might help financially rather than helping with the actual materials like food, for example. I'm thinking in some countries they might struggle with food production due to a lack of irrigation or a lack of farming conditions. What about helping with those conditions in order to bring about more food growing in their country rather than importing large amounts of food that might be
Yeah.
more pricey?
Yeah, providing expertise. Absolutely. I would put that second after actually providing the tangible resources. yeah, providing the expertise, helping with equipment, helping to build that infrastructure. Absolutely. The only thing about war, though, and these conflicts is often that stuff is what gets destroyed, right? It's part of the war strategy, unfortunately. But I do like that, Shane, as we're helping countries maybe rebuild. Again, it's kind of teaching somebody to fish, right?
There's an
So
interesting history there too, where um, farms are used as kind of a resource. Like when areas are taken over by invading forces, they kind of leech off those resources. And oftentimes, if an area knows it's going to be invaded, it even burns its food, which kind of just shows the reliance of communities on on food. That's actually an effective war method to burn your own food, kill your own livestock in the era where in the Soviet era where food was being appropriated from farmers, the farmers would sometimes even kill their own livestock to weaken that regime. So I think it shows the geopolitical tensions that result from food shortages in certain areas and also the reliance on food.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. And I guess the last thing, I'll share in terms of my thoughts on this subject. And again, this is a complicated and maybe it's sometimes controversial topic, very political, about how we as a country, use our resources. I guess what I would say, though, about that is the stronger we are internally, right? As we can solve our own food challenges in the United States, I think the world benefits. I think the stronger we are, the more support and the more we have to offer the rest of the world, and the better we can be at helping during conflicts that arise elsewhere.
So Casey, one question that I had was listening to all that, you mentioned that you were more on the micro level with the San Diego Food Bank. So do you also work with the unincorporated areas as well? Or what is your, I would say, impact with the San Diego Food Bank?
Yeah, so our responsibility is all of San Diego County, which includes unincorporated areas. And we have distributions and nonprofit partners that span throughout the county. Now, there are some of those unincorporated areas or rural areas where they're considered food deserts. There aren't a whole lot of resources out there, grocery stores, other things like that, which is why we created our mobile food pantry program. So we have multiple vehicles that we've transformed into mobile pantries that we will take those vehicles out again into those rural areas throughout the month, often several times a month, to reach those food insecure individuals and families in those areas. It's a way that we can target, right? I mentioned that we do rely in a lot of ways on nonprofit partners to help us with the reach. Well, in the areas where we don't have nonprofit partners, we go out and directly serve that population.
Oh, that's
I
that's
had
really
a
cool.
question
Yeah.
for you. How does the food get to you? Is it donated by people, by communities, or do you have to buy it? How do you get that resource?
Our sourcing is very diverse. We do get donations. We host lots of food drives throughout the year. We had over 1,000 food drives just during the holiday season, separate food drives. So we generate millions of pounds of food through food drives. We also have wonderful relationships with grocery store partners, and we get food from grocery store partners as it's nearing its expiration date. They will provide those donations to the San Diego Food Bank, and then we'll get that food right out to our nonprofit partners and individuals and families in need. We also purchase food. We purchase items in bulk, like rice and beans, and repackage them here in our facility. And we buy lots of produce. Last year, we distributed 50 million pounds of food countywide. 45% of that was fresh fruits and vegetables. And so we purchase produce. Now, our produce program, where we purchase that, I think is pretty interesting and would be interesting to you as we look at solving big issues and efficient ways to do that. A lot of the produce we purchase historically has been called ugly fruits. I don't know if you guys are familiar with ugly fruit. I think there are better terms now for ugly fruit. But this was fruit maybe 2 decades ago that was, for whatever reason, wasn't the right shape, wasn't the right color or size, wasn't fit necessarily, wasn't attractive enough to be sold in a grocery store. And so in the past, if farmers couldn't find another market for that, they were plowing over it or sending that product to the landfill. We worked out a program where the farmers would benefit by donating. There would be a tax benefit. And then food banks across the country, and especially here on the West Coast, because most of this we're dealing with farmers on the West Coast, food banks would pay for processing and shipping, which would bring the cost way down. We pay about 16 or 17 cents a pound and able to buy lots of fresh fruits and vegetables that way. Again, a very resourceful way to use food as we started off this segment talking about there's enough food in this country, and I would say
Yeah.
worldwide. Well, that's part of it. That was enough food that we were seeing that wasn't finding its way to hungry people in this country and specifically in California. And so that's an innovative way, again, to solve a problem.
What do you think is the biggest challenge to getting food to people in remote areas or that are in conflict zones?
Yeah, I think it's consistency. Again, I'll speak first at the micro level. What we do here in the county in those rural areas, we can go out with our mobile pantry and we try to reach as many people who are in need as possible. But what we found, and we just did a survey just a couple of years ago, found that 73% of our respondents have full-time or part-time jobs. So these are working individuals and families. If we go out to a distribution, once a month in a remote area in San Diego County, and it's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, well, it's likely we can't reach everybody because there's a population that's working or unavailable for other reasons. And if we can only be out there once a month, and if there's not another organization that we can partner with or a facility where we can store food, that's their one opportunity to get food. I mean, I think that extends also, though, to at the macro level in other countries, right? The logistics of getting food out there, maybe that you have one shot, that you can't store product, make sure that everybody that needs it can be in that one location. I think all those translates from the micro challenges we see to the macro issues in world conflicts.
Would you say that a way to circumvent that issue of um, actually trying to gather everyone in one area at one time when you're handing out food and that logistic issue, would you say a way to circumvent that would be to try to grow the food in that community or country if we're talking worldwide, or to try to benefit the agricultural economy in that area so that you can teach a man to fish rather than giving them fish?
Certainly create that infrastructure. But I don't know that'll be enough. I think absolutely that would be beneficial. But I think you also need then the infrastructure beyond the growers, beyond the farmers, right? It doesn't just stop with the farmers. You have to have the distributors. You have to have the outlets for that food. So yes, I think you can. We can help create that infrastructure, teaching that making sure farming is occurring, but then you still, I think, need to create the structure for the outlet, whether these are companies that are distributors, whether these are NGOs or certain types of organization that can help distribute that food. I think that's also a piece of it that's complicated and also a challenge.
We have enough food to share here in the US, right? There's a lot that we're wasting. I want to play a quick game with my other hosts who may have not researched this. Mr. Castillo, don't give them the answer. What percent of food in the US do you think is wasted every year?
I
Maybe 37, 47.
Okay.
I'm gonna be a bit bold here and say, I don't know, 57%. That
I'm just
seems
trying
like
to
a bit.
blow you away, but I've seen up to 40%. So
Yeah,
Isabella, you were
close.
closer, 37. Yeah, so around 30 to 40% bracket. Just a quick accolades here because in the San Diego County, which you work at, or you're the CEO of the San Diego County Food Bank, that figure it drops down to 20% food waste, as I've seen it. So clearly, you're doing better than the rest of the U.S. But yeah, you definitely see that there's food to share. There's no need. So if there's food to share outside of the country, there's certainly enough food to go around internally, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, Shane, let me add to that too, and you're right that I've always heard right around 40%. So Isabella, great job. That was
Yeah.
a great guess. And it doesn't surprise me that San Diego County is progressive and our numbers at 20%, are much better than the rest of the country. And I think it's because of things like I described with the farm to family program and how we acquire produce. I think it also has to do with the partners that we have here in California. And Southern California, our grocery store partners. I think over the years, over the last decade or 2 decades, have been able to create a pretty efficient process, right? Food banks are normally considered to be efficient. We're right up there with some of the most efficient food banks across the country. And then the other thing I would add to that, as we look at the efficiencies and waste, is one of the areas we're really unique as a food bank is we've then also developed a composting and recycling program. So we love, in terms of our benchmarks, where we are with our own waste. 50 million pounds, that's a lot of product to process. Our waste is under 1%, which is pretty incredible. It's well below the benchmarks for food banks across the country. But when we do have waste, produce comes in, maybe it's can't be used, it's too ripe. We have a separator, a piece of equipment that is called a turbo separator, and so if the product is packaged, it will separate the packaging away from the food. The packaging will recycle, and then send that material, cardboard, plastics, will send that to a recycler here in San Diego. The food then will place in a digester. We have this very large composter. So the food will go in. We'll add a bulking agent, which are finely, wood shavings that are very fine in nature. The composter will circulate once every hour and will blow ambient air in every 15 minutes. And over the course of 7 days, it creates compost. So we are nearly a zero waste facility. So that compost, then we donate it back to farms, organic farms, schools, community gardens, really anybody. It's donated product. We divert almost everything from landfills. Again, adding back to that kind of circular economy and how we like to call completing the circle. Right? When I found the digester on the East Coast, it was a prototype had been built at a university, and the university had dining services, and those wastes would go to the composter. Compost would be created. The compost would go to the farm on the university property, and then everything that was grown at that farm would go back to dining services. And I said, I love that. You're completing the circle. That's what we want to do at the food bank.
And you saw that, and you're an industry first in San Diego County. You brought that here. Were you the first county to do that, or to take that idea from the university?
Yeah, we were the
Wow,
first. The prototype was built at the University of New Jersey, and then we were the first um, composter that they built to be used commercially.
that's
It's now at some
wild.
Ivy League's campuses, and it's been sold in Europe. But yeah, when we did this, we were the first of our kind, and the first to add the other equipment to it to create that program.
So
Um,
they also sold some in Europe then. Europe's so cool with all of their initiatives. I mean, and by the way, who knew composting could be so interesting? I would I would love to see it for myself. Like some kids want to go to Disneyland, but I think we'd all be much more happy going to your separator.
Well, you all are invited after this.
Thank you.
After this segment, why don't we work on all of you coming to visit? I'll give you a tour of this facility. We have a couple other unique things that I'd love to share, but it excites me that you would be excited to see our compost and recycling program. So let's do it.
Absolutely.
I mean,
well, I would have to fly over there because I'm all the way in Iowa, so that might be a bit hard. But you were mentioning that that you love how excited we are to come visit because having that or spreading awareness about it is important. So I was wondering, what role do you think education plays in tackling hunger and all of this conflict?
It's part of our mission. We provide nutritious food to people in need. We educate the public, and we advocate for hunger related policies and issues. So, education is huge. Again, it's in our mission, it's a responsibility that we have, and it's one of my main responsibilities as a CEO.
it's really cool that you mentioned education because I think if you want to teach someone, you also have to act it out as well. And you're industry first for doing like the compost and the separator, and that didn't even occur to me when I was thinking of food bank. When I think of food bank, I just think, oh, I walk in, get food, I walk out, and all the systems that you have in place. I think if we were to get that out and spread what you guys are doing to other organizations as well, I think like the infrastructure, what you're talking about, we can have a bunch of farmers growing this, but there's not a lot of ways to get that distributed. So I think it's
Yeah.
really cool that you're kind of preaching and kind of teaching what you're doing.
Thank you,
So
Kenneth.
you've
Yeah, and
completed.
I think there are opportunities to educate the public, especially here in San Diego County, about what we're doing, right, and all the things that we're doing. But I'd also extend education um, to public policy, because as we talk about how we solve these problems, we talk about the hunger and ending hunger as a logistics problem. I think that is true, but the way we solve it also is going to be in policy, right? It's the actions of organizations like food banks and other hunger relief organizations, but there's also a government component, right? With that government component, policy is a big deal. And so part of the education is educating the public, educating elected officials on the state of Hungary, on hunger, and then what kind of policies can be adjusted or created to help solve this problem.
And how do you do that for um, other governments, right? Because you've completed the cycle here, and with your separator, composter, minimizing food waste to such an extreme degree. But how do we? You're an industry first, and so this is not common. How do we get other states, let alone other counties, let alone other countries in the world, to follow suit?
Yeah, I think we can try to be the best example as we can. I think we need to make sure our messaging is strong. I will give you an example that we have been visiting food banks across the country over the last probably 6 weeks, and I was at a food bank in Texas, and an employee at that food bank poked her head in the conference room that we were using, and we were getting ready to head back to the airport. So she had a big group of I think 30 nutrition students, and she was wondering if she could use the conference room after we were done. And we said, absolutely. We stood up. We were getting ready to leave. And as we stood up and she had introduced herself, she saw my coat that said San Diego Food Bank. And she said, San Diego Food Bank, you guys have the composting and recycling program. So Food Bank across the country had heard about that program. So it is our responsibility to get that out and to share, what's working for us, and as it is for other food banks to share where they've been innovative. And that's one of the things I talk about this a lot in the food banking world. I love food banks talk to each other. food banks are interested to know what other food banks are doing across the country. They're happy to share. They're happy to talk about those things. I just got a call from a food bank up north yesterday that was having trouble with a software they were using, and they know it's a software we've been using for many years, and they want to know if we could help them. That happens, and so collaboration is big in the food bank world. It's one of the things I love about the food banking world. And so, to answer your question, Shane, we just need to keep talking. We need to keep collaborating and sharing best practices and the innovative things that we're doing across the country.
When you
I'd
when you
like to.
mentioned
Sorry, what was that, Kenneth?
when you mentioned technology, I that kind of just sparked something because I'm a 12th grader and most of my friends are preparing to go to college, and the biggest thing for us is AI. How do we integrate this AI, make a bunch of money, and then live in like the Bahamas or something like that? But I want to digress back to technology basically, and how has technology changed the systems that you guys have been using at the food bank? Is there any AI going on in there, or what's the matter with that?
Yeah, Kenneth, that's a great question. Before I answer, I want to say my son's a freshman at UCLA. He's thinking of just that way too. AI, try to make as much money as he can. Those are conversations that we have all the time. A smart kid, I believe he can do it. But yes, everybody's trying to
We
stay
wish him
ahead of
good luck.
that. Here's my answer to that. Food banking has evolved dramatically in the last, I would say, 10 years. And it's due to several reasons. One, there is more talent in food banking. So uh, food banks have grown, and because of that, it required more staffing and more skilled staffing. So I think you've seen some more skilled, talented people enter the food banking world. The second reason is technology. Food banks are getting much better with applications, how to use them, um, using them with logistics, right? We're getting more efficient with logistics. Actually, a VP that I just brought on did an audit of our routing between our two buildings and the hundreds of distribution sites we have throughout the county, and utilized some software to do that. I imagine use some AI as well, and we just were able to cut 150,000 out of our logistics budget, right, and prevent and create some savings. So technologies have been huge with inventory and inventory tracking and forecasting. We're using software to track our recipients. And that you can also then look at forecasting and utilize AI to do that. Again, there are a handful of applications, maybe a dozen applications that have improved. The technology has improved. Food banks have been better at utilizing that technology. And I would attribute the advancement that we've seen in food banking and the ability for food banks to scale like never before to those two things: a more skilled workforce and better technology and the adaptation of that technology.
So you're saying that in the U.S. and in the San Diego County, you've seen an improvement in food banks due to an increase in talent and in the efficiency of the food bank, and also due to technology. Is that kind of, yeah? So those are the sources that you're seeing here. I wonder if we focus on different factors in other places, like I like to think of wheat, for example. So not the product wheat, but the mnemonic. It's war and conflict, heat. So that would be like global warming, for example. Um, uh, Economic instability, agricultural efficiency, and technology gaps. So technology gaps would be kind of what you're saying now, that helps, that's you attribute a lot of the recent improvement on technology. But when we're looking to improve food banks and hunger situations in these other countries that are perhaps third world, do we focus on improving technology gaps, or which do we prioritize?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think you might have some limitations too on the on technology as well. I think you're going to probably have to focus on all of those now. Which do you prioritize? Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think it probably depends on the country, right? Is it third world? I think there's probably lots of characteristics that need to be considered. I don't know. I'll fire back at you. As you listed those off in it used wheat. Do you think one should be prioritized over the others?
I think that something that we should be aware of is global warming. Just the other day, I was looking at geology and ecology, and uh, right now the radiation from the sun is actually going down slightly, and based on the precession of the Earth's axis and the eccentricity of its orbit around the sun, we should actually be more on the cold side of natural fluctuations, but we're on the hot side, and that's attributed to carbon production from humans. So there's a looming threat, and this could actually cause a mass extinction by the end of the millennium. But I'm not actually sure if it is what we should prioritize because perhaps war and conflict in the geopolitical climate right now, maybe that could wage havoc on some places more than others imminently.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think with some of those worn torn areas that are, they're struggling with the basics, basic necessities. I think it probably is difficult to put, in any type of climate control restrictions. But you made me think of something though, because obviously climate is something that we are concerned about or monitoring, right? Because it is impacting, and we see that, and we want to make sure we're diversifying those food sources, trying to account for maybe some of those disruptions in the future, flooding, fires. Those are things we've had to locally respond to. Certainly we'll see more of those in the future, um, and it's an issue. I mean, it's something we want to monitor because, as I pointed out previously, we're distributing a lot of food, over 50 million pounds. Nearly half of that's fresh fruits and vegetables. That is deliberate. We say that we're a food bank. We also say that we're a nutrition bank. We want to make sure we are distributing nutritious food. So fresh fruits and vegetables are a very important part of what we do. And so again, that has led us to be and to diversify more. And the other thing I would point out is the one of our focuses over the last couple of years is to be able not just to provide nutritious food, but provide culturally appropriate food, right? And that we have to be much more targeted, right? It is a little bit more expensive to go that route, but we also have to be much more targeted on our food choices and the sources that we have. Well, if there are disruptions, right? If there are disruptions like climate change and it restricts what's available, that's going to be a challenge for us in accomplishing those goals. So it is something that we are monitoring here. I think, though, in California, United States, we have more of a luxury to be concerned about those kinds of things versus a worn torn area.
Makes sense. First world problems we have.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, you were mentioning how, some places are more have more poverty than others. So I was actually born in Colombia, and my parents run a foundation called Building Future for All, and they actually also have a partnership with one of the local kind of like grocery stores in Colombia, and they also actually give out food. And I've been in contact with like a local school who is kind of also very impoverished, and we've actually given out information and brought up kind of more awareness in those more kind of like hidden areas that maybe don't know a lot about nutrition. And, not to throw my dad under the bus, but my mom is actually, the person who like does most of the work and kind of like, keeps track and stuff like that. So I was also wondering, because, a thought came up and I was like, what would happen if we stopped conflicts beforehand and maybe more women were in those leadership roles? Do you think that could maybe affect the conflict that, not just United States or South America, just global hunger? Maybe
More
that could
women,
be a
more
way to
food.
fix it. Yes.
No, I think there probably is something to more women in leadership and preventing conflict, right? It does bring a different dynamic. And I'd be all for that. The other thing I would say is maybe if we're able to solve some of these problems like food insecurity or corruption, that's also preventative, right? And so I think it's probably there's a good number of factors involved. I love that idea. And uh, I think that probably goes to the need for democracy, right, in more of these areas, or move more towards that. But yeah, I love that idea. I think there is something to that. And then I would add, again, being able to solve some of these issues in each of these countries probably would also prevent. If you had a healthy, fed country, obviously they're going to be less likely. If you improve poverty, there's going to be less likely a need for war or conflict.
And it's because,
Interesting.
yeah, because I would say a lot of wars were fought like in the past because of the lack of food, and they were desperate, and that's basically all. That's the only way they could get food. So
They're
here's an
fighting
here's
for resources. They're fighting out of desperation. Yeah, there's a number of reasons, but yes, if we can resolve some of those issues before, I think that would be pretty preventative.
Right,
so
like
a
think about the
question.
Women's March on Versailles to drive down bread prices, or the Irish potato famine. And that also speaks to diversifying agriculture, where if you farm more than a single thing like potatoes, then if a disease hits, you have more food to fall back on, right? I find it interesting because we talk about conflict when we talk about the UN, but the idea that some of that conflict is caused by hunger, it speaks to the importance of this particular SDG.
And a question that I had for you, Casey, is I see all these numbers online about how many people are actually hungry in San Diego. So I wanted to go to someone that's experiencing that on a basically daily basis, and that's your job. So how big is hunger in San Diego, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's bigger than most people know, and typically when it's discussed, I think it blows minds. I think most people see San Diego as a pretty affluent place, beautiful place, depicted that way in movies. But there's high poverty here, and even higher food insecurity. So I'll start with poverty. Poverty probably right now is sitting somewhere around 500,000 people that are facing poverty in San Diego County. Food insecurity is different though than poverty. I mean, there are some similarities, but it is different too. And the way food insecurity is typically defined is not being able to consistently obtain meals, right? So, 2 or 3 consecutive meals in a row. It's when you don't know where that next meal is coming from. And so, with that definition, right now, I think the number is 820,000 people facing food insecurity. So, not consistently able to have nutritious meals.
Hmm.
And so, that's a big number. It's a big percentage of our county. Our county is approaching 3.5 million. So, it's a very big number. Now, it's a number that's always changing, and this month's 800,000 people is not necessarily going to be next month's 800,000 people. What our hope is, again, as the county's food safety net and a food bank that's here to provide emergency services, is that you have access to food when you need it. But our ultimate goal is to help you get out of that line, to shorten the line, to drive down how long you need to utilize our services, and so that you can be self-sustaining. And so that's the ultimate goal. But yes, the number right now is a little over 800,000 in the county that are facing food insecurity.
What
Wow.
initiative do you see as the most effective in helping people become more secure and independent from the food bank? Because it's interesting, not just wanting to be a crutch, but wanting to actually help people gain food security themselves.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that in our latest study, about 73% of the respondents stated that they had a full-time or part-time job. So that's a misconception often, that these are folks that aren't working. Well, most of them are. Most of them are working families. A lot of them are underemployed. A lot of them are working in part-time jobs, multiple jobs, but that's preventing them from having benefits. A lot of them are in low wage jobs, and so workforce development, I think, would be one area, one policy, one area where we could make a huge difference. If we're able to make ground up there, and so that's why we, as the source where people come to us, they know who we are. This is where we could help them. We could help them with some of that workforce too, and provide those resources. Not that we're doing that work, but certainly can direct them to partners in the county and help them with that. I would also say another, and this would be policy, but also operational, in that it's called CalFresh here, or SNAP nationally, which are food stamps. Those are often, that's a consistent support that can be beneficial to a family that needs to use that support short term when they get back on their feet. Again, a crazy number of people in the country are living paycheck to paycheck. It's something like over 60%, right? Are living paycheck to paycheck. And I would probably um, not be going too far on a limb here if I say that's a greater percentage in San Diego County, because it's an expensive place to live. So a lot of the folks that we work with and need to utilize our services, they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're just barely getting by, but then it doesn't take much to send them over that edge. Maybe a car repair, maybe a big medical bill that was unexpected, or a utility bill that shot up. Just these things, just something as simple as needing to change the brakes, a couple $100 that they didn't plan for. They're going to need to utilize our services. And that's where food stamps can come in and really help them in the short term, and get back on their feet.
Good to hear.
And is there like a central place where this information is like disseminated, where you guys can say, boop, here, we're gonna be here, come here if you need food? Is there like an app, or is it like a website? What works for the San Diego Food Bank?
Yeah, you certainly can call. We will direct you by making a call. But yes, on our website, during COVID, we created what we call GPS Food Locator. And it's an area on our website that you can type in your zip code, address, or just zip code, and it'll bring up a host of nonprofit partners or distribution sites in your neighborhood. And you have the ability to customize that search. So you can do within a 5-mile radius or a 10-mile radius, and it'll bring up a list of all of those partners and distribution sites, the types of programs that they have, the hours that they're open, and their location. And again, that includes hundreds of sites that are available to that neighbor. Again, we have 2 large warehouses, but we don't want people necessarily coming to our warehouse. If they're struggling with food, we want them to go down the streets, somewhere in their neighborhood, to obtain that food and possibly other resources.
And a key idea I think you talked about before is the idea of nutrition. You're talking about you're handing around 50 million pounds of food with half of it being fresh produce. And when I heard that, I was thinking, how are you able to have at least half be fresh produce? Because I can't even keep the vegetables in my like fridge to be like good like before finishing them all. So my I'm gonna need your expertise on this because I've been arguing with a friend about this, but would you say if you had to choose one, this is a balance game, would you rather have more food but less nutritious or less food but more nutritious being handed out?
Yeah, we're faced with that. Um, we're faced with that dilemma every day. So I think it's. I think I'm going to say I'm going to play on the fence here. I don't know that you can choose. I think you have to balance it. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, we do rely on donations through food drives and donations through grocery stores. So we do have a nutrition policy. So there's some things that we won't necessarily distribute or we don't ask for, you know, when we're collecting. You know, we try to stay away from sugary drinks, right? Things like that. We will get donations like candy after Halloween, but we have nonprofit partners that we'll give that to. We won't make that part of our normal distribution. But we have to weigh all the other products, right? And they vary in their nutrition value. Um, and then at the same time, we can be very deliberate and targeted in going after fresh fruits and vegetables. So I think what I would say is we have to strike the balance, and I think that's going to be the case always. I don't want to be so rigid that we say, "Hey, all we'll do is fruits and vegetables," because that won't work. That's not what everybody's looking for either, right? And so I think our job is to strike the balance. It's to listen to our nonprofit partners, but also to listen to the neighbors that are receiving our food. We got to take all of that in and do the best we can following our nutrition policy to nourish our community.
We talked about our final topic, economic inequality, to an extent, regarding how people can become in a position where they need to rely briefly on the food bank to get back on their feet, right? But I'd like to circle back to technology and advancements in hunger, uh, because when we look at something I was learning the other day is broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and one other thing. They're all created from some ancient species of wild mustard, just by humans selecting for certain traits. So apples are sweeter than they typically would be in the wild. Cavendish bananas are selected for certain properties that they have. So all bananas are pretty much clones. So humans have done a lot of tampering with food, even Roundup resistant grains, for example. I'm not sure whether that's good if we want to be spraying grains with Roundup in the first place. But what progress have you seen in terms of altering uh, plants and crops for better conditions like drought resistance?
That's interesting. I think there's more and more experimenting going on, and you see things like hydroponics, right, and other things like that. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. The other thing you made me think about is as you talked about some of the like Roundup or other chemicals being used. One thing that's interesting that we've been doing as a food bank the last couple of years is creating a program to work with small local farmers. We're making investments in this area, local farmers and fisheries. Um, it's a more expensive route, which is why we've gone out and solicited certain funding to support that. But it's great to do because, and if you talk about climate, if you're using local farmers here, um, obviously that product has less to travel to get to its end user, right? I think that's kind of neat. But um, you're also able to target the types of food, more leafy foods, right? And to have a little bit more control over what that farmer grows. because you can work with that farmer to um, plan for that crop, which is kind of an interesting thing. But and then you also have more control on the pesticides and the things that are utilized, or more visibility than working with large farms across the country. And I just wanted to, you just sparked that as an, and reminded me of an interesting thing that we're doing. And so the last couple of years, we've been able to utilize local farmers, and then ultimately it creates a circular economy as well, right? These dollars are staying here locally with these small farmers, as we've talked about developing some of these war-torn countries and creating that infrastructure. Well, that's, we're doing that locally, right? We have an ability to help support these local farmers. Some of them are new farmers, help grow their farms here, keep those dollars here locally. The produce comes here, feeds a local population, again, creates that local and circular economy.
Um,
So, sorry, go ahead, Isabella.
you mentioned that working with farmers in technology has allowed you, for example, to get rid of pesticides, like, for example, using selective breeding, like Shade had mentioned. But do you think we could use kind of like that strategy and that system in a bigger scale, like, for example, using international or global collaborations? And do you think that working, countries working with one another and benefiting from one another, do you think that could help reduce numbers?
So I would say the answer is yes. I would also say it's probably a lot more expensive, or a more expensive way to go right now. And I'll bring it back to, what I just brought up in terms of our local farmers program that we created 2 years ago. I think the testing lab is here in the United States. I think the testing lab is in our local communities throughout the United States. Let's figure out how to do this, how to make these investments, how to build it, how to make it self-sustaining, and then maybe we can replicate that in other countries.
How do you collect that data to judge how well these policies are working? Because in any testing lab, you need to collect data on the experiment to
Yeah.
determine the results.
Oh, it's tough, and there's not a lot of data out there because it's brand new. I mean, you think about some of these contracts we just signed last year. Well, they're growing crops right now. And so I think in the next 12 months we'll probably have a lot more data. We do know it's a more expensive way to go, so we already know that. But can it be scaled? Can, the more you invest, the more consistency, and the bigger the market you can create for some of these small local farmers, will that bring costs down? I think it will, but I don't think we're mature enough to know that.
I want to circle back really quick to this idea of uh, selecting for certain traits and even perhaps producing clones of some sort of crop with optimal conditions or optimal traits. Do we want to do that? Have you seen benefits or negative effects to doing this? Because it does limit diversity, but it may also improve drought resistance, allowing communities that rely on certain crops to continue to thrive in the
Yeah,
drought.
I would say I'm not sure I know enough about it.
Okay.
I would I would add, though, I think it's necessary that we keep at it. We keep
Okay.
researching. I think there's going to be some negative effects, but I think you do that. You continue this research. You try these things because the benefits may far outweigh any of the negative implications. So I don't know that we're far enough along to know that. I think it's interesting. Again, I think it's something we probably have to do, but I think we need to do ethically. It Yeah, so I'll stop there.
So I think this discussion was amazing. This hour of, I think I've learned a lot as well. A lot of questions that I've had kind of got, I have a better direction of it now. And
Same here.
so
You've answered a lot of questions I just have one though that's left that you haven't answered. I gotta bring it to your attention. In times like the Black Plague, or um, or other events where economies suffer, right? Um, how does this relate to food security? Because we talk about macroscopically, macroeconomics, the economy is in a decline, but how does this affect the individual level and the family in terms of food?
Yeah, I'll just go back to maybe the most recent pandemic. Years ago, we sat down as a leadership group and we did scenario planning, and we thought about a lot of things. We thought about war. Um, we scenario planned for flooding, for fires, for earthquakes. The one thing we didn't plan for was a pandemic. And however, going through that exercise was still very healthy because a lot of the things that we came up and how we would respond to a fire or a flood was sufficient and was what we did to respond to a pandemic. So yes, what we know is whether it's a plague, the pandemic, or some of these other natural or world emergencies, food banks are needed. That's what we've recognized. That's what we've seen historically, and food banks are going to be vital to the overall kind of ecosystem, working closely with our government agencies. Um, the impact that'll have, like a plague, on the individual and the family, I think uh, that's hard to determine in kind of a um, in this broad way. I guess all I could say is, as an organization, these are the kinds of things that we think about and plan for. As a food bank, we recognize day to day basis where the county food safety net. But we also recognize in an emergency, it's where many people are going to look for help, and it's our obligation to be prepared for that. And so we play through these scenarios and play them out all the time, Shane.
Mr. Castillo,
Um,
great to have you on. Sorry, Isabella, before I wrap it up, and I have one closing question. Listeners and viewers of the show will know the magic wand. But before I do that, Isabella, go ahead.
one last question. I apologize. Now that we know that food banks are essential for communities, but not knowing what the future holds, do you think we are better prepared for future situations if this is ever to happen again?
I think I don't want to be a pessimist. I'm not so sure that we're better prepared. I think I'm not sure we've learned from all of the lessons that we've been taught, especially over the last couple of years. So that is worrisome. And I say that globally. What does it mean for the San Diego Food Bank? Well, we've been through wildfires a number of times. We just responded to floods, and I think responded well early last year. We responded to the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, and I thought we responded well to COVID. We went from serving 300 people to 600,000 after the lockdowns, basically overnight. And so I'm proud of the organization where we responded, and we certainly learned from those lessons. And so I feel good about where we are, where the San Diego Food Bank is. Globally, to speak in broad terms, I'm not sure that we're prepared that way.
Well, you're leading the
Hopefully,
charge,
they
and,
lead
and
by
you're
your example.
exactly. You're leading. You're leading by example. Especially hearing that anecdote about this other woman who is involved in nutrition, right? And she's also part of this hunger effort. And she recognized you and your county for its work in composting. So you're leading the charge. It sounds like you're collecting data. You're analyzing situations. You're figuring out how to be prepared. And the food bank has done things like going from hundreds to thousands during the pandemic. So the food bank is so important. Listeners and viewers, remember that, support the food bank, donate. How can viewers and listeners at home help your work?
We try to make it easy to participate in this work. I'll start with volunteering. We had over 15,000 volunteers that visited both of our warehouses last year. We have 3 shifts a day to volunteer, including 2 on Saturdays. And you're doing things like sorting fresh produce, or you're building senior food boxes that go out to seniors that are 60 and older living on a fixed income. So there's a great opportunity to just volunteer and be near your peers and other wonderful people that are like-minded. There's also opportunities to host food drives, and that can be done physically or virtually. We have a neat virtual food drive that you can share with your other friends at school, your companies, your family. So those are easy ways to generate food and collect food and to donate that to the food bank. And then finally, monetary donations go a long way. For every dollar we receive, we can provide 2 meals. So we're able to leverage this vast network and our purchasing power and our efficiencies to really make that dollar go a long way. So I would start with those 3 key areas.
This is a call to action then to all the listeners and viewers, the millions or probably billions at this point of people listening to Voices of Impact. Go out, support the San Diego County Food Bank, flood this amazing organization with your support. Before we go, if you were arbiter of the world, like God Castillo of food, like the Greek gods that were dedicated to different particular things, but you could only make one. You could only make one action. I'm going to give you this magic wand that confers upon you this hypothetical ability to make one change in terms of food across the globe. It's actually a laser, which is pretty cool. But all right, here you go.
That's wow, that's big. I should probably be more prepared for this question. I'm gonna stay with food, and it is that that the world commit to solving food insecurity, because I do believe this is a problem that we can solve. So that there is a sincere commitment to solving it. And when I say solve it, you know, throughout the history of the world, food insecurity, people have been hungry. But I don't think you're ever going to get away from populations being hungry at one point or another. But I want the world to commit to solving the accessibility problem. We want to make sure if you're hungry, you have access to nutritious and clean food. And so that would be my one wish. That's how I'd use my wand.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on the Voices of Impact podcast.
Listeners, viewers, that was episode 8 of Voices of Impact podcast. Thank you for tuning in. You can expect to hear spirited youth discourse on gender equality in our next episode. There's a lot to look forward as we dive headfirst into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Impact.
We hope you enjoyed the Voices of Impact podcast, where we engage in spirited discourse on the world's most pressing issues with the goal to discover and implement solutions.
Our mission is to overcome global and societal conundrums through student unification, accepting our roles as future stewards of planet Earth. Please consider sharing this episode with other humans to enable spirited youth discourse on the planet's most pressing issues.
If you learned something or felt empowered by this episode, tune in Saturdays for more student-led change-making conversations, and be sure to follow, share, and positively rate our show.
Voices of Impact is brought to you by the University of San Diego's Jacobs Institute for Innovation in Education, PPC Profit Pros, and SchoolCAST, a Cloudcast Media program to empower the voices of young students around the world.